Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and thank you so much for joining me today. Today is going to be a little different. If you've been listening to the show regularly, we have been mixing things up just a little bit lately, just to play with format, keep things interesting. I am more than a little ADD, so doing the same thing over and over gets very boring after a while. And I have to admit, today I'm actually recording from Cancun, Mexico. So we're on vacation down here for the week, and I, of course, did not get enough recordings done in order to avoid having to record from Mexico. So today's episode may even be a little shorter because I want to go have a pineapple drink. Apparently they serve a drink inside of a pineapple shell, and I'm very excited about that. Today, we're actually going to be talking about kind of a question that comes off of the episode 50, just a few episodes ago, where I talked through my kind of career story and some of the decisions that I made with my financial planning practice. And I briefly mentioned in that episode having shifted my practice from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Bozeman, Montana, and got quite a few questions around wanting more details about that. So today's episode is us kind of digging in to, I guess, some of the decisions that I made, some of the ways that I did it, things that I learned, mistakes that I made, and recommendations that I have for advisors that are kind of looking at this transition from in-person to virtual. And, one of the things I will tell you is it's just me today. So if you've been a regular listener, you're used to hearing me and somebody else on every single episode we've ever done. So today we're going solo just to see how this works. And so we'll see. You'll have to give us comments and hit us up in the VIP group at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP if you want to ask additional questions or you have comments about this episode. So kind of jumping in, let me read off the two questions that that I got actually in the last 24 hours and decided to actually do the episode on this specific topic. So one question was actually posted in our VIP group, and it was, does anyone have any insights, comments, suggestions on moving my 18-year-old practice to a digital office or a shared office building space? I currently have a standalone building with 3 offices and a conference room that's no longer being utilized and don't want to continue with this substantial overhead. Since I have a presence in the community with street signage, I'm concerned about the perception of my clients, prospective clients, and business partners. Comments would be appreciated. The second email that I got was, I'm tossing around the idea of having a satellite office in Alaska, which I think is awesome. I know you had offices in both Milwaukee and Bozeman, and there were some specific questions in here about registering both sites on NAPFA. When did you actually start transitioning clients from Bozeman to Montana? And would you advise waiting until you have a base of clients or do the transition right away? So both of these advisors are trying to move from kind of the in-person standard, the way it's always been done model, which is where we meet with all of our clients in person, to something different. And this was kind of my path. So because we didn't get a lot of time in episode 50 to detail it, I'll kind of give some more specific details on the decision for me to open my office in Bozeman. And then we'll kind of get into a few more actual details regarding these questions and more just kind of overall conversations that I have with advisors regarding this transition. So I guess to get started, the big point that I want to make is we're going to be talking about moving from in-person to virtual. That can be long distance. It could be, moving states, moving countries, or it could just be staying in the same city that you're staying in, like our first question comes in from, and just wanting to kind of shift and not have the overhead of office space. Office space is, for a lot of advisors, the second most expensive thing that they pay for, just after staff costs. Staffing is very, very expensive, and having an office building is the second most expensive, whether you rent or own. So I know there are a lot of advisors out there that are interested in kind of making this transition because they want to save money. They want to be able to kind of live a lifestyle that's more conducive to their goals, and maybe meeting with all of their clients in person doesn't facilitate that. So if we go back to, 2012, whenever I had Serenity Financial Consulting, so my own RIA, I was based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And whenever I went to go launch the firm, I was living in a studio apartment and did not feel like I wanted to be, meeting with my clients in my studio apartment. If I'd owned a home and had a, big dining room or a separate office space or something, I might have chosen to work from home and had clients come to my office. But when I looked at kind of the living situation, it was very apparent I was going to have to meet with clients somewhere other than my home. And so what I did was, I didn't know any different. I'd always worked in traditional office spaces where we met with clients in person, sometimes virtually, but ultimately we had an office space in order to meet with clients. So I kind of went out looking for what will work in terms of office space. Whenever I was starting my firm, I had extremely limited resources. And so signing, a 2, 3, 5-year lease and going through and outfitting an office space just wasn't an option. There just was not money for that. But I fortunately lived just on the north side of Milwaukee in this small village called Shorewood, and got to asking around and found a room inside of an office building that was available. It had previously been connected to another office space. So there were kind of these two spaces connected that a therapist had used actually. And so I said, you know what? I think a single room office is enough. So I talked to the landlord and he was charging $350 a month, and it included all of my utilities except for internet. And I figured, you know what? I can afford $350 a month for an office space. And so ended up signing a 1-year lease there. And that was a good decision for me. That worked for me. It was the way that I had always known to operate. It gave me a space to go work from. So, I went and I showed up at 9 o'clock in the morning and I left at 5, and I kind of turned it into my kind of traditional office model that I had when I worked at previous firms. And the layout of that office, it was a pretty big room. It was something like an 18 by 20 room. So it was big enough that I had kind of a desk area. I had a couch and a TV in there so I could meet with clients and kind of sit in my little living room space. And then, coffee maker, things like that. And that was about all there was room for. Went out and I, paid for a sign, which is several $100s, if not thousands of dollars, depending on how you do it. I spent a couple $100s on it so that clients would be more easily able to find my office. And I got started. And so it operated that way for 4 or 5 months and started growing the firm. I had a lot of early success in terms of getting clients in the door and meeting with them and getting them to sign on. And I made the glorious mistake of reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. And, if you read that book, if you haven't read it already, I highly recommend it. But I do warn you, if you're an entrepreneur, that book may change your life. And I actually don't mean that to be overly dramatic. I mean it in a way of, if you're not ready to make some changes, but you are somewhat entrepreneurial minded, I would recommend waiting to read the book, because just the way he outlines things and the way he talks about being an entrepreneur and owning your own business, it's hard to get it out of your head once you hear it, I'll be honest. And so while there are some parts of the book I don't necessarily agree with or didn't follow, like the way he made his money with basically these kind of direct marketing strategies and being a pass-through for shipping and manufacturing stuff. Anyway, it's kind of a long time ago that he was actually doing some of this stuff. And I did still want to start a financial planning firm. There were a couple things in the book that really caught my attention. I don't even know that I realized it whenever I was actually reading the book, but I remember part of the book he mentions, one of the challenges is when you're an entrepreneur, you have this expectation for yourself that you'll continue to operate in a 9-to-5 manner kind of going forward. And even when you own your own business, you should work from 9 to 5. And, there's a lot of theories on and documentaries that have actually been written on how we got to this point in America that we generally work from 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Some of us worked 8 to 6 or 8 to 8, depending on your industry. But ultimately, we kind of had this standardized work schedule, and we always go to work at the same hours, right? We kind of have this standard work schedule, and then we design our life around that work. So if you have to be at work at 8, then traffic's going to be bad. So I'm going to go drive to the gym. I'm going to get up at 5:30, drive to the gym, get a workout in, take a shower at, the locker rooms there at the gym. And then I'm going to go to the office. I get off at 6. I'll come home, have dinner, go to bed, right? You kind of design your life around when you're going to be working. And whenever you first launch a business, I found that I kind of followed that same model. I still got up and I went to the office and I worked for a certain number of hours, and then I would go to the gym after work, and then I would go home. And it sounds absurd now, but it never occurred to me to go to the gym in the middle of the day because I wanted to or I could. And now, I guess I've gotten more used to working virtually and working from home, and it has become, I don't know, I guess I've embraced it a little bit more and just kind of learned how, because I do think it's a little bit of a huge skill set to learn how to work for yourself and work from home. But I remembered sitting in my office after having read that section of the book, and I don't know that it really clicked with me, but I was sitting in the office and it was like 4:00 and I was looking for something to do. And as an entrepreneur, when you own your own business, there is a never-ending list of things to do, and ultimately they will never get done. I mean, you will always have a to-do list that is longer than you can get done. And I was looking at my to-do list thinking like, I don't really have to do any of this stuff, but I have to be here another hour. And that's when it clicked. That I was telling myself, I had set this expectation that I had to be in my office for an hour, even though I didn't really have to. I had to be there till 5 because I felt like I had to be there till 5, not for any reason of I needed to get A, B, and C done, and then I could go home and do something different. And that was when I realized that I was not embracing the opportunity that entrepreneurship brought me, that owning my own business gave me the opportunity to live my great life, gave me the opportunity to build the life of my dreams. If I wasn't going to embrace it, then there was no sense in having that opportunity. I mean, I can make, especially at the time, I could easily have made more money by going and getting a job and working a 9 to 5 and getting a salary instead of starting a business and going a year and a half without a salary. So if all I was going to do was just recreate the work environment that I'd had at a previous firm, I might as well just go get a job at a previous firm. And that, honestly, as silly as it sounds, that was a turning point for me. Or I guess I should say, as silly as it sounds to me now just to say it, that was a turning point for me whenever I was evaluating, was I living my great life? Was I doing the things that I wanted to be doing with my life? And was the business supporting that? Or was I starting a business and trying to design my life around my business? So because of that kind of epiphany, I really started to dig in and ask myself the same questions that I always asked clients. So I historically used Kinder's 3 questions, which if you're not familiar with George Kinder, amazing life planning guru and kind of one of the founders of kind of the life planning movement of blending psychology and money, which for many financial planners is now natural. It was not whenever he was kind of getting his start, but I believe it's the Kinder Planning Institute or the Kinder Institute. We'll link to it in the show notes. But basically, Kinder's 3 questions are when you're working with a client, you ask, if you had unlimited time and money, what would you do differently? Basically, if resources were no object. And then, basically the second question is if you go to the doctor's office and the doctor says, well, I have good news and bad news. The good or the bad news is you're going to die in 5 to 7 years. The good news is you won't be in pain. You're not going to be in and out of hospitals, but ultimately, like your time at those 5 to 7 years, that's it. That's all you get. What would you do differently? And this really helps clients kind of start to dig in to say like, oh, what would I do differently if I knew when I was going to die, that 5 to 7 year mark? The third question is, if you only had 24 hours to live, what would you regret? What do you appreciate and what do you regret? To really dig in on, where are they at? Where is a client at in terms of being happy with where their life has gone, what they have accomplished in their life. And some clients are really, say they've really checked the boxes, but for the most part, most clients have a list of things that they want to do differently. And, one of the things that kind of when I did that for myself, what I realized was that process and my definition of financial planning is that, we help clients live great lives. That's financial planning. We help clients live great lives. And now we use money as a tool as part of helping them live their great lives. But we're the only people in their life that ever ask, what do you want to do with your life? We're the only ones that ask a 50-year-old that hates their job, what do you want to be when you grow up? What career path is really going to be ideal for you? Do you want to start a business? Where do you want to travel? What size family do you want to have? Do you want to have a family at all? Do you want to be single? Do you want to be, married? Do you want to have a partner in life? These are the questions that we actually ask clients, and no one else has the privilege of asking clients these questions. So we help them figure out what their great life is going to be, and then we help them figure out a way to actually live that great life. We have such an amazing career. I mean, we really do. I think financial planning is the greatest career out there because of the impactful work that we do with our clients. But the realization that I had was kind of going through this whole process was that my entire job was around how to help my clients live great lives, and I was not living my great life. I was working a 9 to 5, not going to the gym, staying late when I didn't need to and meeting clients when I didn't necessarily want to, or working with clients I didn't want to be working with, or whatever it was. I realized that I was not embracing my own career choice. I was not living my great life. And if I couldn't live my great life, how in the world was I supposed to help clients live theirs? because, my experience with clients was many times they fought me on living their great life, because they also had these preconceived notions or these expectations or barriers for why they couldn't do some of the things that they wanted to do, when in reality they were false barriers. And it was my job to help tear those barriers down, to help those, my clients get to the point where they could accomplish the things that really fulfilled them, really made them happy. And I wasn't doing the same for myself. And from there, I spiraled. And anybody that knows me knows when I get something like that in my head, it's hard to make it stop until I've either decided it's a really, really bad idea or I have kind of moved on it and gone into action. And so I started mapping out, what was my great life. And the decision that I made was that I wanted to live in snow country. I want to live somewhere where I could ski 80 to 100 days a year. So at the time, that was my goal. And so the other piece being, I did not want to live in just a resort town. So like Sun Valley, Idaho, amazing skiing there at Sun Valley, but it's a resort town. It's hours and hours away from the nearest, decent sized city. They have a tiny airport. That wasn't going to be ideal. And I basically pulled out a map and started circling places where I could live. And there are only a few places in the country actually that have skiing within 20 to 30 minutes from town. And I know what everyone's thinking, why didn't you move to Denver? And the answer is Denver's like 2 or 3 hours from skiing. It's kind of a nightmare to actually get up to skiing, especially on the weekends because of how busy it is. But I wanted to be 20 to 30 minutes away from skiing. My joke was I wanted to be able to ski on Wednesdays. If it was a good powder day on Wednesday, I wanted to be able to go up, ski in the morning, come back down and work in the afternoon. And so that's what I did, was I looked for places that I could do that. And ultimately, Bozeman, Montana won out. So I made the decision that I was going to open a satellite office in Bozeman, Montana, with the intent that within a year or two, whenever I was ready, that I would actually move full-time from Wisconsin to Montana. And if you didn't listen to episode 50, just as a recap, I'm originally from the South, born and raised in the South. I have been chasing snow since college. Milwaukee was kind of an accident, to be completely honest. I didn't have any intention of being there or staying there. I didn't have any ties there. It was just kind of the city I ended up in. And so I didn't have any reason to stay. So it wasn't like I was, leaving my family or where I had grown up. It was just kind of an area that I had landed, and it ended up being kind of a launch pad to make the shift over to Bozeman. So, when I sat down and started asking basically all the same questions that advisors ask me now, with what in the world is it going to take to move offices? Because you have all of the logistics of compliance and technology and all of that. You have the actual marketing side of things on how in the world am I supposed to get clients? But then you have the most important and most stressful piece, which is what am I going to do with my clients? Like, how am I supposed to communicate this to them? So we're going to go through kind of each of those sections, I guess, as I did it, and then kind of give some ideas for other ways to do it, because I definitely did not do everything right. Definitely got lucky on a couple of things. But first, I want to also loop in a couple of other stories, I guess, that had an influence on me, because I probably should have had the opportunity, or I probably should have taken the opportunity to give them a shout out for episode 50. But there were a couple of advisors that I met that opened my eyes to the fact that this could even exist. So just a couple of names, you may or may not have heard of some of these advisors, but one was Carolyn McClanahan down in Jacksonville, Florida. Met her through NAPFA, so she owns a firm down there. And she was one of the first advisors that asked me the question of like, how big of a firm is too big? Like, is there a point at which you ever stop growing? And I remember that being a very interesting question, because everyone always says like growth, growth, growth. What you quickly realize is that growth is very expensive from a time perspective. It's a lot more time to work with new clients than existing clients. And she said, why not just have 100 clients that you work with and you don't take on new clients? And then you can, if you have a team around you with 100 clients, you can work 20 hours a week and do something else the other 20 hours. And that was it was kind of funny that no one had ever asked me that question before. I was actually in an interview with Carolyn. She did not hire me, and I love her to death. So she made the right choice by not offering me a job. But she was one of the first firm owners that wasn't all about growth. She was all about lifestyle. Another advisor that I talked to was Sunit Bala, who hopefully is listening to this episode because I know he listens to some of the XYPN radio podcasts. And he was another one who told me that he spends 10 hours a week in his kids' class. He's like the classroom dad. And I don't know if it was one full day a week, but every field trip and everything that he does, he goes with his kids. And he jokingly told me recently that he needs to hang out long enough. Right now his kids think it's really cool that he's there, and he needs to be friends enough with their friends so that when the kids no longer think it's cool for their dad to be there, his friends like him. And so he gets to hang out until they're in high school, which I thought was brilliant. So nicely done, Sunit. And Sunit is another one who, I asked one time kind of what he was doing with his firm. He said, well, I'm hoping to bring on one new client this year. I said, this year or this month? He goes, this year. Like, I have one client that I think may leave, so I'm going to bring on one more client to replace him. And I just thought that was amazing because, again, these are not conversations that we have in financial planning. And yet, when you're building your business, you've got to design the business to support your ideal lifestyle. And these were the first advisors that ever told me that they were life-driven first. And I don't like this term lifestyle practice because it makes it seem like you're a part-timer or you're half-assing your work. And lifestyle practice is intended to say, in my opinion, that you're focusing on your life first and you're building the business around your life instead of focusing on business as number one and then build your life around your business. And I always recommend the first one. Even if you want to build a huge business, that's okay. Just be sure you understand the why and that you're designing your life in the way that you want and that you're living the life that you're building a big business to support so that you're enjoying yourself. And so it's not all about the business. And then the final advisor that I remember listening to a presentation from him was Scott Leonard out of California. And he took his wife and 3 kids on a 3-year sailing trip. They started in Florida. They went down through the Panama Canal and ended up somewhere in New Zealand or Australia or something like that. I don't remember the end point, but it took 3 years. And he ran his firm, a very big financial planning firm, from a sailboat halfway across the world. And I remember just kind of sitting in that presentation thinking, this guy had a dream. He had something. His family had something they wanted to accomplish, something they wanted to do, and he built his business around that dream. He built his business to support whatever that lifestyle was. Now, you may say a 3-year sailing trip with 3 little boys around the world sounds terrible. I agree. I don't think I could ever do that. But there may be things that I want to do that you think are crazy, like skiing 80 days a year. And there may be something that you want to do that I think is crazy. And that's okay because it's your life. It's not mine. It's not Scott's. But you get to figure out what your dream is and then live it. So to bring it back, I guess, to the original point of kind of what this episode's all about is that's really where this thing has to start. You have to figure out what's your great life. And it doesn't mean you have to, put 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week on your calendar for work and fill it all in with how to build a big business. I just encourage you to start with, what do you want out of life? For me, that was having an office in Bozeman and potentially moving to Bozeman. For you, it may be something completely different, but don't be shy about it. Don't be ashamed of it. Really own it and really know that it was the thing that you wanted, the thing you had to have in order to feel accomplished in life. And that may be, time with family. I think that's probably the number one thing I hear from advisors looking to shift virtual is they just want more time with family. Some want to travel. Some want to travel nonstop. They want to travel, full time. Others just want the ability to take 2, 3, 4 weeks off a year. Some want to be able to move closer to family, closer to skiing, closer to hunting, and, which may be the Alaska move here. There are a lot of different reasons, but no reason is right or wrong. It's right if it's yours. So figure out what that is and then decide what it's going to take to get there. So these advisors, that sent in these questions kind of made the same determination I did, which was a move was necessary. Opening an office in a different location, whether that be it was kind of the same town or across the country, was going to be necessary in order for them to live their great life. So how do you do it? Now, the path I took was I was a little conservative with it, honestly, because at the time I didn't really know very many advisors. I didn't know any advisor that had opened a second office location like I was doing. I knew these advisors that I mentioned that were kind of living their great life and were inspirational for what I was trying to do, but I wasn't aware of anyone that had kind of that second office model. So what I did was I flew to Bozeman, Montana, and basically crashed on couches while I figured out a few things. And one was figuring out office space. So we will link to a blog post in the show notes that I wrote regarding office space, because there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I actually took I think an incorrect route at first, which was I basically followed the same model I had in Milwaukee and went and found a office, or basically a room in a building somewhere that I could rent. Now, the problem in Bozeman, the reason I think that was a mistake for me, was because real estate in Bozeman is extremely expensive. Now, for my friends and listeners that live in Boston or New York and San Francisco, yes, I know it is extremely cheap in Bozeman. But compared to my Milwaukee rent and other areas of the country I have lived, it was extremely expensive. It was very, very hard on the budget. But I decided, you know what, this is the way it's always been done. This is the way it's supposed to be done. I guess I need this. Clients will expect me to have an office space. So I rented an office space. I think I was paying like $650 a month. So twice basically what I was spending in Wisconsin, to actually get a physical office location that I could go work from, that had a desk, that had meeting space and that sort of thing. And kind of opened up my office in Bozeman. What I ultimately transitioned into, which I wish I had done earlier on. Now, it was actually in the same office building. It was owned by an attorney. And I worked with that attorney. I said, hey, you have 2 huge conference rooms, as well as your own offices where you meet with clients. And these conference rooms are never actually being used even 2 or 3 hours a day, much less 8 hours a day. So what I said was, hey, I really don't need this office space. I'm not here often enough. I'm not an attorney, and everyone here is an attorney. So maybe this isn't a good long-term fit, but could I rent the conference room for you by the hour? And, it's sitting here empty. I'll give you $20 an hour, $25 an hour, whatever that number needs to be for you. I think I was paying 20. And I said, I'll call your assistant when I'm booking a meeting and double check that it's available. But it was one of the 2 conference rooms was always available. And I'll, come in here and meet with prospective clients or existing clients if they want to meet with me in person. And he said that was great. He's making an extra $20 an hour for a room that's already being paid for, right? He already owns the building. So it's just free money to him. And that was the way that I cut my rent from $650 a month down to well less than $100 a month, I would say, because I just wasn't doing that many meetings in person. And truth be told, what I quickly realized was I was doing all of my meetings with centers of influence, never actually clients, and continued to, push those meetings to coffee shops and that sort of thing. It basically got it down to where I had an office space, or I had a place to meet with clients if I needed it, a place to manage my mail, but didn't actually use it all of that often. That worked out really well for me, kind of making that shift. So that was kind of how I handled the actual meeting space. One of the tricks is you do need a physical location in the state that you're opening up a new office in. And the reason is so that, one of our questions was, did you register both sites with NAPFA? And there is a huge advantage to being listed on sites like NAPFA, on the XY Planning Network, on CFP Board's website, and being able to get local SEO traffic and that sort of thing. And so you do need to have a physical location somewhere in the area that you're going to be living so that you can get listed on all of those directories and sites. Now, that could be your home. It could be an office space. It could be a co-working space. Co-working spaces are kind of the new fad right now, and I love them. There are national brands like WeWork. There are others that are just local, kind of shared office spaces that only have one location in whatever city you're moving to. You may be able to find an attorney or an accountant that's, that you plan to refer to, that's a great center of influence, that's kind of in your space and serves your niche. Oh, there's niche. Everybody take a drink. If you're playing the niche drinking game, whatever it is that kind of works for you, you can go sign on with them and get a mailing address at their office location. Just tell them, hey, just dump all my mail in this little area, or you can set up with them to forward the mail to you if you're not going to be in that area. But just so that you have a location that you can list on NAPFA, CFP Board, all of those sites. And it's free. None of those organizations charge you to list a second office space, but it has to be on your ADV. So if it's on your ADV, you can get it listed in those various locations and start getting prospective client traffic from those websites. And so the same can be said for, if you're going to stay local and you want to stay in the same town, that's fine. Just have a mailing address, have a location that you can list that will be on your ADV as your office location, which again can be your home or it can be a co-working space that just allows you to stay listed on all of those various websites and just to be able to get leads. From a compliance perspective too, and I don't want to dig too much into the compliance of it, but needless to say, it's actually not all that complicated. Compliance, as you have heard me say many times before, is used as the big scary monster that doesn't let you do anything fun. When truth be told, compliance is not all that hard whenever you have multiple office locations. Just if you're going to have a physical location in a state, whether you have any clients there or not, you have to file with the state. A physical office location means you're doing business in that state. So go get registered. And you can either talk with your compliance expert or consultant, or you can do it yourself. Just go on and basically check the box when you're going through it's FINRA has the registration system for, even fee-only firms that are state registered. But as you're going through, you just check the box for 2 states instead of just one. And that state may have certain requirements. They'll reach out to you and ask you for, copies of your contracts and things like that. So to get registered in another state is really not that big of a deal, but you will have to do it if you're going to have a physical office space there. So that's kind of the office space piece of the conversation. And I will say that the most important piece will be the conversations that you have with your clients. So let's go ahead and jump into that, and then we'll kind of clean up with some more logistic conversations around technology and traveling and that sort of thing. So the conversation with clients, this is a very interesting piece, I think, that terrifies advisors, and it terrified me. And it was, how am I supposed to tell all my clients that have this expectation, that I'm going to be in Wisconsin and I'm going to be meeting with them in person, because I have been meeting with them in person. How am I going to explain to them that I'm going to not be here half the time because I'm going to be in Bozeman half the time, and eventually I'm leaving Wisconsin? And I did not start having this conversation the moment that I started having the thought, right? Like, I waited until I was very clear, one, that this was something I really wanted to do and that I was going to do, and two, until I kind of shored it up in my head for how I was going to have this conversation. Now, at the time, I'd have to go back and look, but I didn't have a huge book of business because this was only, 6 months into me owning my firm. I probably had 20 clients at the time that I had worked with on some type of basis. I did a lot of hourly work, so these were not 20 ongoing clients. So I had done some smaller projects with clients that expected to come back and see me in the future, as well as had maybe 10 or 12 ongoing clients and then some investment-only clients. So I kind of had a plethora. As listeners have heard, when I started my firm, I did not have a very good niche, which is a major mistake that I made. I just kind of took on any client that I could. But I had a decent range of clients being so early on in the firm that I needed to communicate this change to. I had a long list of centers of influence that I wanted to communicate the change to, because I wanted them to know, the types of clients that I wanted, referred over to me. But with my clients, close to half of them weren't in Wisconsin anyway. So I started looking at my book of business, my book of clients, and I said, well, these clients don't care where I'm sitting. They don't care if I'm in Wisconsin or, Thailand, because they're in California. They couldn't care less where I'm sitting. And so we can just ignore all the virtual clients because there was no expectation from them. They didn't care. All I said was, hey, I'm going to be moving. No big deal. And then when I looked at the rest of my clients, I tended to work with younger clients who are all in their 30s. I think my oldest client at the time I had one client in their 60s. Other than them, I think everyone was 42 and younger. I started looking at my clients and realized a huge chunk of them were going to be moving away from Wisconsin at some point anyway, because they're young. Young people move. We're highly, highly mobile. Gen Y, the millennials, are the most mobile generation in history because one, is job security and issues there, but it's just so much easier to move now than it used to be. And so, I knew with job changes or starting a business and kind of mapping out, looking at each of my clients' individual situations, there were a lot of them that were going to be moving themselves. They were going to move away from me. Now, it's a little different when your advisor moves away from you, but I wanted to work that into the conversation to say, hey, ultimately you're going to be moving at some point and it's not going to matter. I just may beat you to the punch in terms of making the move. And then I had the few clients that I knew were going to stay in Wisconsin. They were always going to be in Wisconsin. And they did have this expectation that they were going to be able to meet with me in person. So basically what I did was at the next review meeting, I just outlined for each client, hey, this is an update on my end. And that is that, I've decided to open up an office in Montana. Now, I tended to get very friendly with my clients. So we were friends, I would say. And so they already knew that I love to ski. They knew my hobbies and that sort of thing. They knew that I had been traveling out to Montana anyway. They had seen newsletters about it or pictures on Facebook or whatnot. And so I can't say they were overly surprised when I said, I love to ski and I want to go be able to ski more often. I want to live the lifestyle that I've always dreamed of. And I basically told them the same thing that I've said now a couple times on this episode, which is, look, my job is to help you live your great life. But if I'm not living my great life, I don't think that's authentic. I don't think that's fair. And I don't think I can do my best work if I'm not being authentic, if I'm not doing what I need to be doing in order to be happy. I will tell you that in that transition, I did not lose a single client. And I didn't even get pushback from any of my clients. None of them cared. They really didn't. They just said, that sounds great. I mean, what are they going to do? Look me in the eye and say, no, you can't go be happy because I need you living in Wisconsin? No. The main question that came up, the only question I guess that ever came up was, how often will we see you? And I would give them the honest answer. I'm not really sure. We're going to see how this thing plays out. Maybe I come back on a quarterly basis, maybe on an annual basis. I'm not exactly sure because I didn't want to set the expectation that all of our meetings would continue to be in person. So I didn't want to set that expectation, but I also didn't want to lie and say, I'm never coming back or I'm going to come back X often and not actually do it. So I just kind of wanted to leave it up in the air. I had in my head though that, I met with clients 3 to 4 times a year. So around quarterly, and they tended to miss a meeting. My assumption was I would do one meeting in person and the rest of the meetings virtual. And I found that actually held. That was actually not a bad way to think about it because then I could come back for a week or two a year, meet with all of my clients in person, whatever quarter I felt like that was going to be best. And then the rest of the meetings would be virtual. But again, I did not just up and leave and just like move across the country next day. So what I did for the next almost, 18 months, for the next year and a half, I spent every other month in Montana. So I would fly out. And the beautiful thing is when you're doing flexible travel like this, it's actually a lot cheaper. So flights that, now can run me $700 and $800 to get in and out of Montana were costing me $250 and $300 because I could fly Frontier. And for any frequent flyer, if you have to fly on a schedule, you would never fly Frontier purposefully. But I could fly Frontier and get delayed for 24 hours in Denver because, I was on a flexible travel schedule. And so it kept it really cheap for me. But I would spend about a month in Montana and then I would come back to Wisconsin and spend about a month and go back and forth. And so I did a couple of things I think that were good decisions as part of that. One was I did it slowly. So for any clients that were unsure and maybe didn't express that to me, I was able to show them that they still got their emails answered. I still picked up the phone and chatted with them. Everything was basically the same in terms of service levels. And I wasn't in Wisconsin 100% of the time like I had been. The other thing was it allowed me to, when a client would say, hey, I'd like a meeting, I'd say, hey, well, we're going to need to meet, this month, and I'm in Montana, so let's just go ahead and meet virtually. So even though I was spending half my time in Wisconsin and half my time in Montana, I did my absolute best to meet with all of my Wisconsin clients virtually because I was going to be virtual half the time. Now, if they said, no, this is a topic that I really have to meet in person, I might say, well, I really think that's something we could cover. And if it doesn't work out, let's then schedule, an in-person meeting. And for the most part, no one fought me on that. I mean, it just wasn't an issue. Part of this could be the clients that I was working with. But again, I was working with a wide range in terms of ages and expectations for how they would meet with their advisor. And very few of them came to me because they wanted to meet with an advisor virtually. They came in because I was a financial planner that served their needs. And so I don't think I had some, unique client base that just naturally was attracted to working virtually at this time because that wasn't really my original path. And so they didn't really push back all that much, to be completely honest. And so I just started meeting with them virtually. And I will say the best way to meet with a client virtually is to just get them to do it once, and then you may never get them back in your office, which I have had happen time and time again with clients that you meet with them virtually once. They realize just how amazing it is to not have to drive to your office and not have to deal with parking and childcare and all of those things. And they just, the next time you go to schedule a meeting in person, they tend to want to meet with you virtually again. That was kind of my experience with this shift. And so basically kind of forced it on my clients in a gentle way that, we were going to meet virtually. And then they were okay with it and just kind of made that transition. Again, it took me about 18 months. When I was in Montana, I was talking to new centers of influence and talking to them that I was going to be making the move to Montana. When I was in Wisconsin, I was going back to my old centers of influence and saying, hey, just a heads up, I'm making this shift. And, so if you have clients maybe that are older or have an expectation that I'm going to be in front of them all the time, or they're, if they're constantly demanding in-person meetings with you, I'm probably not a good fit for them. It was about this time that I kind of started to find my niche, which really was the small business owner that was starting a business. Should I say small business owner, a individual, a young individual, generally in their 30s or early 40s, that was looking to start a business, just because I just love having those conversations, and I loved helping them kind of incorporate the business aspects and the financial planning with their personal lives as well. So my niche started getting a little better defined. I was able to talk to the centers of influence about that, and just kind of slowly made the march towards Montana. And then when I felt like I was ready, I ended up closing up shop in Wisconsin and heading out to Montana, and completely closed down the Wisconsin office. And basically what I did was, one of my centers of influence there, who's an estate attorney, who's also a friend in Wisconsin, I just said, hey, can I borrow your office space from time to time, this conference room that you're not using, and I'll pay $20 an hour? And they said, sure. And I actually used their office space, or their mailing address as a listing, so I could keep NAPFA listing there and that sort of thing, because I got really good traffic from NAPFA in Wisconsin. Just so I was able to kind of keep the leads there. But I also, made it very clear on my website that I live in Montana. I travel back to Wisconsin occasionally to meet with existing clients. So if you're going to be a new client in Wisconsin, don't expect to meet with me in person, unless it just happens to be the week or two that I'm back there. But otherwise, kind of set the virtual expectation, and that seemed to work really well. So that was kind of my transition, honestly. That was how I had the conversation with clients. I got myself really psyched up and then had to calm myself down, because I realized that it wasn't as big of a deal as I was making it out to be, that clients cared a lot less than I thought they did. And that really the only people that ever pitched a fit about me making the move was other advisors telling me that basically I was tanking my business, as opposed to my clients, who I really cared about. And those are the ones that, they were the ones whose opinions I actually cared about. So once I'd had those conversations with clients, I had to make a couple other decisions, just sort of from a logistical standpoint, to be sure that I was set up in a way that allowed me to work virtually. So whether you are going to be having kind of this 2-office model, or you're going to just a virtual office, it is a big transition. I will say that setting up a virtual office is very, very different if you have been in person for a while, because you do have these kind of legacy expectations from your clients, but also legacy information and systems and all of that in terms of how you're actually going to operate. So I do encourage you, if you're starting a firm and you think you're going to go virtual at some point, just build it to be a virtual office from day one, instead of trying to make the transition later on. But technology is really, I think, the biggest, most important decisions that you'll make, in addition to kind of your marketing strategy. So some of the technology that I would encourage folks that are out there kind of looking to make this transition to take a look at, one was phone system. Now, it's so absurd that I feel like phones are like the oldest technology that we have inside of our businesses, and yet it was one of the harder things to figure out, because I tried my best. I didn't want my cell phone to be my business phone. I didn't want to get a call at 2:00 in the morning from a client because they were thinking about something and wanted to call and leave me a voicemail, and it comes through on my cell phone. I didn't want to have to cut my cell phone off when I was, during family time or play time, and cut it back on during work time or anything like that. So I was very, very anti cell phone as my main business line. So I accomplished kind of my phone system in 2 ways. One was I found a voice over IP, or a VoIP phone system that was very affordable. At the time, I was using RingCentral. Jive is another one that a lot of XYPN members are using and really, really love. So you can check both of those out. I believe Jive is a lot cheaper with only one user. RingCentral may be a little cheaper if you have a bunch of folks. But what that allowed me to do is have a phone system that was not dependent on me plugging a physical phone into basically a phone jack. It could work from anywhere that you have internet. So I had an office phone sitting in my Wisconsin office. I had an office phone sitting in my Montana office, and it just allowed me to have a centralized phone system to take calls that didn't rely on my cell phone, which again does not seem like that big of a deal until you actually start trying to operate, and then you realize you're making calls from your cell phone and you don't want to be. So I do recommend getting some sort of flexible phone system. There are apps that you can get, like Line 2 or Grasshopper or that sort of thing. I just really liked having that physical phone in my office, because at the time, again, was still a little old school, but it worked well for me. You can see what other options are out there for you. The other thing that, as kind of part of this transition to traveling a lot more, and I was going to more conferences and speaking, I was doing a lot of skiing, during the day, was I wanted someone to pick up the phone. I didn't want prospects particularly, but clients to call and not not have someone on the other end of that line. And so I found a company called Ruby Receptionist. And I will say Ruby changed my lifestyle completely. Up until that point, that I was basically terrified of ever not having my cell phone or, being next to an office phone that I could answer the phone if somebody called. Ruby is basically a virtual reception company that allows you to have someone that always picks up the phone. So that you work I don't remember their time span, but it was 14 or 16 hours a day. It's a very wide range. And they are basically a call center that I set up, and people would call my main office number, and I would route it to Ruby Receptionist, and Ruby, whoever picked up the phone there, would say whatever I asked them to say. So I would say, basically the script was, thank you for calling Serenity Financial Consulting. How can I help you today? I said, well, that's my brand. That's what I want people to say. Wonderful. So anytime someone at Ruby Receptionist picks up the phone, they say the same script. And, somebody says, well, I'd like to talk to Alan. Well, on a little mobile app that I had on my iPhone, I could say, hey, I'm available, I'm not available, route calls to my voicemail, take a message, anything I needed Ruby to do, I just put in that app and they would just do it. If I was going to be traveling, they would say, hey, Alan's not going to be in the office for the next 7 days. He'll call you when he's back. Would you like for me to take a message and push it through to him immediately? Anything that I had asked them to do for me, they would. And that allowed me just the flexibility and the freedom to, again, travel more, to be able to ski during the day and not worry that I was missing phone calls and not, and that prospects didn't want to leave a voice message for a financial advisor, which I understand is kind of a strange thing. So maybe they didn't want to leave a voicemail. They wanted to talk to a human. And Ruby did a fantastic job of that. I don't know how many people Ruby employs, but I will say that they all sound the same. I think they go through voice training or something. It's beautiful. So people thought I had a receptionist. They really did. They would come into my office sometimes and meet with me and go, where is your receptionist? I talked to her on the phone. And I would laugh, say, no, I have a call center that handles all my calls for me. And they go, oh, that's a great service. And I actually had clients, depending on their profession, sign up for it in order to help manage their phones because they wanted someone picking up the phone as well. So they are, I won't say expensive for the service. It is a heck of a lot cheaper than hiring a receptionist. It may hurt to spend the $200, $300 a month, depending on how much of the receptionist time that you're using. I think you'll find that you actually don't need that many minutes from them. But that is a technology that I highly recommend looking into, is just kind of taking care of the professional face of your business. The other one, and this is something that you've heard me talk about on the show before, is picking up a calendaring software. I've historically used Schedule Once. I have recently made the move to Calendly, mainly just because Calendly is a lot simpler, but Schedule Once has a lot more flexibility. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for. But this just allows me to schedule meetings, to do a lot of custom options. Like I'm going to be in Montana this month and I'm going to be in Wisconsin this next month. So if you want to meet with me in person, you can only schedule a time when I'm actually going to be in your state. So I had I had 4 options. I had meet me in person in Wisconsin, meet me in person in Montana, phone meeting or virtual meeting. And I was able to hook all my calendar in a way that allowed people to only book, with me in person if I was actually going to be there, but they could book, phone meeting or virtual meeting anytime. And I found for the most part, people ended up booking those virtual meetings instead of waiting, to meet with me, whenever I was going to be back in that state. So picking up something that just allows you to help manage all of your crazy calendaring, even if you're going to be, only traveling once a year or a couple times a year, being able to kind of manage your schedule is huge. And so it's just super convenient for them to be able to go on and book a meeting on your calendar and it not be a big deal. The other piece of technology that I'll say you've got to have is a really, really good webcam. So if you're going to make this move, people tend to try to use the webcam on their computer. Do not make that mistake. Go out, I think it's about $100. Pick up a Logitech C920 is what I have. It's a USB, just plugs in and plays. If you have a Mac, you may tell me that since Macs are the best thing since sliced bread, apparently, that your webcam works great. At least get a headset for audio. Just clean it up a little bit, especially if you're making this move from in-person to virtual. You still want to give that professional face. You can be relaxed. You can be sitting there in a t-shirt, but you don't want sound or video quality issues to be a problem. So spend the $100, get a good webcam. My Logitech has great enough video. It's excellent video. It's high def, but the audio is fantastic. I don't have to have a headset. I can just talk straight into the microphone on the webcam, which is just really convenient for me. So be sure you grab a few things like that just to kind of round out kind of what you're doing for your clients. Because again, you still want to give that professional face to your clients, even though you're going to be meeting with them virtually. And the final piece, and I know that this is obvious, is that everything has to be cloud. Nothing server-based. All of your technology needs to be cloud-based. If you're going to be traveling back and forth, you're going to be in airports a lot more often. You're going to be driving a lot more often, depending on how far away the location is. You're not going to have space for a server somewhere. You don't want to pay to set up a VPN to some server sitting somewhere that you can use. Just get everything cloud-based. It's not hard in this day and age. Most of the technology is cloud-based. If it's not, it will be there soon. And if you put a little bit of pressure on your technology providers, they may be willing to move things cloud-based for you, because if they haven't already, they should be. So just, again, I say all of that with the technology to say there are a few considerations that you want to make, but those are all kind of easy, inexpensive things to pick up. The final consideration that you have to have is marketing. And that is, how are you going to find your clients? And you know what I'm going to say. You all know it. You don't have to hear me say it again. You need to figure out who your ideal client is. You need to figure out your niche market, because going virtual is highly dependent on who your niche market is. You may have a niche market that does not want to meet with you virtually. It may exist. Okay. There just may be that group of people. And I'll give you an example. Anyone in the state of Montana. I found as soon as I moved to Montana, people would rather drive 8 hours to come meet with me in person than meet with me virtually. So if I had a niche market of, ranchers in East Montana, I will meet with all of them in person. I promise. None of them are going to meet with me virtually. So one, you have to know that your niche market is actually available to meet with you virtually. They're willing to do it. If I was targeting Eastern Montana ranchers, I would be literally, in combines with them in order to have conversations with them. So this is not, that is not my niche market. There's a reason for that, but you need to know who your niche market is. One, that they can even go virtual. And two, that if they're willing to go virtual, that they can find you. Clients are no longer looking for the advisor that lives closest to them. They're looking for the expert, the most knowledgeable person in their unique situation. So you have to be the expert in their unique situation. If you're the master generalist, it's really, really hard for people to find you, because how are they going to find you? Financial planner, you're never going to show up in Google search if you're across the country. The only way you're going to show up in Google search is if you're local to them, and hopefully you pop up, with some local based Google search engine optimization. You need to be the advisor that helps bass fishermen after they win a big purse, or you need to be the specialist that works with Delta flight attendants or dentists selling their practice in the next 5 years, because that expert can find clients all over the country. That expert, you don't need to be the local financial advisor. You'll be the best at what you do. You'll be the expert in your area, and people can find you. One XYPN member, Lauren Williams, has a firm that focuses on working with Olympic athletes. She doesn't need to be near that prospective client in order to work with them. She just has to be findable online and known in kind of the various communities and with centers of influence and with prospective clients as the go-to expert in working with Olympic athletes, and they will work with her virtually no matter where she lives. So kind of the final piece to the puzzle is marketing. I personally did this through YouTube videos and blogging, again, without a very clearly defined niche. I leveraged NAPFA at the time. You can also leverage XYPN, Find an Advisor portal, and the CFP portal, and centers of influence, and all of these various areas. But it is 10 times easier. You will struggle so much less if you have a very, very clearly defined niche market. So if you are unaware of the niche drinking game, you can go join our VIP community in order to learn more about it. If you are a part of the niche drinking game, I am sorry, you probably just took like 20 shots. So I invite everyone to play if you choose to drink, because you will drink every episode so far. So again, if you have additional questions about this topic, I would love for you to get into the VIP community. It's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP, be able to ask additional questions. I hope this gave you a little more insight into my transition from Wisconsin to Montana, which again, did not do everything right and did get lucky in a couple of ways, but overall went really well. Kept my clients, and I would say started living a life that was much more in line with my goals and the things that I wanted to be doing at that time. And it gave me the opportunity, had I not sold Serenity, that I could move away from Bozeman at some point whenever I choose. I ultimately did sell Serenity, so it doesn't matter at this point, but it would have opened up additional kind of flexibility and options had I needed it. So as always, you can go check out the show notes at xyplanningnetwork.com/55 for links to some of the additional resources that I mentioned in this episode. And again, be sure to join the VIP community if you want to ask me or Michael Kitsis, previous guests, or our other listeners any questions that you have. So thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.